She was just a young black teen in a cramped house staring at a life that felt impossible to change. But one night on a borrowed phone, she discovered crypto in the stock market. That single moment became her turning point, and you going to find her turning point in this story. Now I want to hear from you. What's your favorite crypto strategy? And who's the mentor that inspires you most? Share it in the comments, because every story of success begins with learning. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Journey. She was just a young black teen girl, barely 16, her world no larger than the peeling walls of the small house she called home. The neighborhood was alive with sound, children shouting in the street, sirens wailing in the distance, the steady thump of bass from a passing car. But inside their two-room home, silence often carried the weight of struggle. The air was heavy with the smell of cooking oil reused too many times, and the floors creaked under the weight of generations of sacrifice. Her mother worked long shifts at a diner, her hands calloused from scrubbing, serving, and surviving. Her father had been gone for years. Some said chasing dreams, others said running from responsibility. To her, he was just a shadow she rarely thought of anymore. The house was cramped not only in size but in opportunity. Poverty lived there like an unwanted guest, stretching itself across the corners of their lives, reminding them of its presence every time the rent came due, every time the power flickered, every time the landlord's footsteps echoed in the hallway. She would sit by the small cracked window at night, a second-hand notebook on her lap, writing down her thoughts. While other kids dreamed of sneakers or phones, she scribbled questions. Why do some people live in skyscrapers while others stay trapped here? What makes money flow like rivers for some, but trickle like drops for us? She didn't yet know the answers, but she knew one thing. She was tired of being told that wealth, opportunity, and freedom weren't meant for people like her. At school, the world wasn't much kinder. Teachers looked past her, assuming she would blend into statistics that had been written long before her birth. Some students mocked her for dreaming out loud. Girl, you ain't never gonna be rich. Be real. People like us don't make it. Their laughter was sharp, their words like glass, but she held on to them like sparks that fueled her fire. And yet, there was one thing that kept her alive inside: her hunger to learn. Not the kind of learning that was forced in dull classrooms, with outdated books, but the kind she stumbled upon in the library when no one was watching. Rows of dusty financial magazines no one cared to read. Old newspapers about markets rising and crashing. Even a borrowed computer where she discovered forums filled with people speaking a language that at first felt foreign. Stocks, charts, crypto, markets, volatility. The first time she heard the word crypto, it sounded like a secret code, something powerful and hidden from people like her. She didn't understand it, but the more she read, the more it felt like a doorway into a world where rules could be rewritten, a world where gatekeepers didn't get to decide who won and who lost. At night, when the neighborhood outside turned restless, she stayed awake under the weak glow of a lamp, tracing graphs on paper, copying strange words like blockchain and liquidity she didn't yet fully grasp. Her mother would sometimes wake up and scold her. "Baby, close that notebook. You got school in the morning. What you doing up at this hour?" But she would only smile softly and say, "Mama, I'm learning how to change our life." Her mother never understood, but she didn't need to. The days stretched into years of repetition. Poverty pressed harder. Bills piled higher. Her mother's eyes grew tired, and the girl felt the sting of the world's judgment. How society looked at her blackness and her poverty as a double sentence. Every headline, every statistic, every glance from someone who thought less of her reminded her that the world was not built to see her win. But she refused to surrender to invisibility. She had a secret weapon now: knowledge. And though it wasn't wealth yet, it was a seed planted in her heart, watered every night with discipline and stubborn faith. She would whisper to herself before falling asleep, "One day, I won't just dream about the skyline. One day, I'll rise above it." On some evenings, when the summer heat made the house unbearable, she would climb to the roof of their building. From there, she could see the city stretching endlessly, lights twinkling in the distance, skyscrapers piercing the sky like monuments to another world. She would sit on that rooftop, legs folded, notebook on her lap, imagining the day she would live in one of those towers, looking down, not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. But that dream was still far away. For now, she was just a young, black teen girl in a cramped house, carrying questions too heavy for her age, battling a world too cruel for her innocence, and yet somewhere deep in her spirit she knew. History had been written against her, but destiny was still unwritten. What she didn't yet realize was that her curiosity, the late nights, the scribbled notes, the strange graphs that made no sense, was slowly carving out a future far bigger than the walls that trapped her. Because one day soon, those same walls would no longer be able to hold her. The first time she touched a stock chart, she didn't even know what she was looking at. Candles, bars, green and red lines climbing and falling. It looked less like finance and more like a strange kind of art. But as the weeks passed, she began to see patterns, movements that felt alive, like waves rising and crashing on some invisible ocean. She copied every detail into her notebook. The dates, the highs, the lows, the sudden collapses. To her, it wasn't just numbers. It was human behavior, fear and greed painted across a screen. She had stumbled onto an entire world hidden in plain sight. A world where people who understood could multiply $1 into 10 and 10 into 100. A world where decisions weren't made by luck, but by study, patience, and courage. And the deeper she went, the more it consumed her. During lunch, at school, while her classmates scrolled through social media or gossiped about who liked who, she opened her notebook filled with charts and notes. Some kids teased her. "Why are you wasting time with that? You think you Wall Street now?" She never answered. Instead, she tightened her grip on her pen because she knew they couldn't see what she saw. It wasn't just about money. It was about power. It was about freedom. Her neighborhood told her the story of survival, but these books, articles, and online forums whispered another story, the story of ownership. Ownership of assets, ownership of time, ownership of destiny. The first time she heard about Bitcoin, it was late at night on a borrowed laptop at the public library. An online forum was buzzing with voices debating whether crypto was the future or just a scam. Most people dismissed it, but a few, a passionate, almost prophetic few, wrote as if it were more than just digital money. They spoke of it as a revolution. She leaned closer to the screen, absorbing every word. A currency that doesn't belong to governments, a system where the powerful can't control the flow, money that lives on the internet, unstoppable. Her heart raced. The thought of something beyond the grip of systems that had always excluded her lit a fire she couldn't put out. She began to see Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other coins not just as investments, but as symbols. For the first time in her life, she felt like there was a door that didn't require permission to enter. But it wasn't easy. She didn't have money to invest. Some nights she felt the weight of her reality pressing down on her so hard it nearly broke her spirit. How do you chase wealth when you barely have enough for bus fare? So she started small, saving every coin she could, skipping snacks at school, walking instead of riding the bus, doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. She scraped together $10, then $20. The first time she bought crypto, her hands shook as she pressed the button. It wasn't much, barely enough to buy a single meal. But to her, it was everything. It was proof that she could participate in a game designed to exclude her. And though her account balance looked laughable compared to the giant numbers she saw online, it gave her a quiet kind of power. She was no longer just watching from the sidelines. She was inside the arena. But with knowledge came isolation. Her friends couldn't understand why she obsessed over markets. Even her mother worried. "Baby, this sounds like gambling. I don't want you to get hurt." She would smile and reassure her. But deep down, she wrestled with doubt too. What if it was just a dream? What if she wasted years chasing illusions? Yet every time she thought of quitting, she remembered the cramped house, the cracked window, the whispers of statistics that predicted her failure before she had a chance to try. And then she would return to her notebook, to her charts, to her stubborn promise. "One day, I'll rise above it." She studied late, into the night, teaching herself things no one ever taught her in school. How supply and demand moved markets, how fear and panic created opportunities, how patience could turn pennies into fortunes. She read stories of people who had bought Bitcoin at pennies and now lived lives of freedom. She didn't envy them, she studied them. Still, the markets were cruel teachers. The first time she lost money, she cried. It was only a few dollars, but it felt like the world had betrayed her. She stared at the red numbers on her screen, her stomach twisting. But after the tears, she wiped her face and whispered to herself, "This is part of the process. Failure is a lesson. I can't quit now." Each loss toughened her. Each gain strengthened her. Each night she carved out knowledge from the chaos, building herself into something stronger. By 17, while her peers were worried about prom dresses and college applications, she had built an entire system of learning. She tracked the stock market's biggest companies, studied Warren Buffett's principles, devoured YouTube lectures on blockchain technology, and joined online communities where traders debated strategies deep into the night. But she never told many people. Her dream was too fragile to expose to careless words. She knew the world was quick to dismiss a young black girl with ambition as naive or delusional. So she kept it close to her heart, like a secret flame she refused to let anyone blow out. The irony was that while others judged her for chasing unrealistic dreams, she was actually laying the foundation of something far greater. Piece by piece, she was building the mind of a future billionaire. And still, on summer evenings, she returned to the rooftop of her building. Notebook in hand, she gazed at the glittering skyline. This time, though, her dreams felt closer. The skyscrapers no longer mocked her. They invited her. She could almost feel the glass of the penthouse window beneath her fingertips, the rush of standing high above the city that once tried to bury her. She whispered into the night air, "I will get there. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year, but I will." The wind carried her promise across the city. And though no one else believed her yet, destiny was already listening. The city never made it easy for a young black girl with big dreams. Every day the world reminded her of limits, spoken and unspoken. At the bank, when she walked in to ask questions about savings accounts or investment opportunities, the tellers would glance at her with condescension, their eyes flicking from her worn shoes to her secondhand notebook. "Sweetheart, are you sure you understand this?" one of them once asked, his tone dripping with doubt. She smiled politely, but inside she burned. They don't see me. They don't know what I'm capable of. At school, the counselors pushed trade programs and safe career paths. Maybe nursing, maybe office work, something stable. No one mentioned Wall Street. No one mentioned finance. No one mentioned entrepreneurship. And certainly, no one mentioned crypto. Every system seemed designed to narrow her horizons. Poverty was a prison and the bars were invisible. Lack of access, lack of networks, lack of belief. But she refused to accept their ceilings as her sky. Still, resilience came at a cost. Nights of studying left her exhausted. Her grades slipped in classes she found meaningless compared to the fire in her heart for markets. Teachers scolded her. "You need to focus on your future, young lady." She wanted to laugh. They couldn't see that she was building a future, far beyond the small boxes they offered her. Then came her first real loss in the crypto market. It was supposed to be a small trade, a quick flip of a coin she had read about online. She watched the green numbers rise, her heart racing, convinced she had finally cracked the code. Then within hours, the market turned. The green evaporated into red, her tiny balance shrinking smaller and smaller, until she lost nearly everything she had saved for months. She sat on the floor of her room that night, knees to her chest, tears rolling down her face. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'm just chasing dreams that aren't meant for me. But then she thought of her mother, dragging herself home after 12 hours at the diner, smelling of grease and exhaustion. She thought of the landlord's threats. She thought of the look in people's eyes when they silently told her she'd never rise above her circumstances. And something inside her hardened. She wiped her tears and whispered, "If I quit now, then they win. And I refuse to let them write my story." So she went back to her notebook. Instead of blaming the market, she studied what went wrong. She learned about risk management, about never betting more than she could afford to lose, about patience being more powerful than greed. She began to understand that success wasn't about winning every trade, it was about surviving long enough to grow. The losses humbled her. The small wins encouraged her. The cycle of failure and growth became her silent teacher, but the barriers didn't stop with money. Society had other ways of reminding her she didn't belong. When she shared her dreams with people in her community, some laughed. "Girl, you talking about crypto like it's gonna save us. Ain't nobody from here making it out that way." Even family members warned her. "Be careful, baby, don't get caught up in something dangerous. People like us gotta be realistic." Realistic. The word cut her deeper than any loss in the market. To her, realism was just another way of saying, stay in your place. She refused. Still, the loneliness grew heavy. She didn't have mentors. She didn't have wealthy friends. She didn't have anyone to show her the path. All she had was herself, her notebook, and the quiet fire of a dream too stubborn to die. At 17, while most of her peers celebrated high school milestones, she celebrated her first disciplined trade. It wasn't glamorous, just a small profit on a stock. She had studied for weeks. But when she closed the trade and saw her balance climb, however modestly, she felt something shift. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the validation. Her effort, her study, her sleepless nights had meant something. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving the market. She was beginning to understand it. But success came slowly. Every dollar she earned seemed to vanish as quickly as it came. Bills ate at her small gains. Unexpected expenses dragged her back down. It was a constant tug-of-war between progress and survival. Some nights, she wanted to scream. Why did it have to be so hard? Why did the path feel steeper for her than for anyone else? The answer was painful but clear, because she was a young black girl in a world that didn't expect her to succeed. And if she wanted to rise, she would have to climb higher, fight harder, endure longer. So she did. She doubled down on discipline. She created strict rules for herself. Save first, invest second, spend last. No matter how small her income was, she forced herself to put something aside for the market. Even if it was only $5, it was fuel for her future. And while others saw crypto as a gamble, she treated it like a science. She studied Bitcoin's history, Ethereum's technology, the patterns of fear and greed that drove human behavior. She learned about cycles, about bubbles, about corrections. She trained herself not to panic when others panicked, not to chase when others rushed in. Slowly, she was building what few around her ever had: financial discipline. Yet beneath it all, the discrimination never disappeared. When she spoke up in online trading groups, people dismissed her because of her age, her gender, her race. You wouldn't understand. Leave this to the men who know what they're doing. The words stung, but instead of retreating, she sharpened her focus. She promised herself, one day I'll be so successful they won't be able to ignore me. Her rooftop visits became sacred rituals. After every loss, every setback, every small win, she climbed up there with her notebook and stared at the skyline. It reminded her of the gap between where she was and where she wanted to be. But instead of crushing her, the distance fueled her. "This is my training ground," she whispered into the night. "This pain, this struggle, it's shaping me. One day, these lessons will make me unstoppable." She didn't know when the breakthrough would come. She didn't know how long the suffering would last. But she knew one thing. She had already survived too much to give up now. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of destiny, opportunity was waiting, about to collide with preparation in a way that would change her life forever. The day it happened, she almost didn't believe it. It was a trade she had planned for weeks, carefully studying patterns, news, and signals. While most traders chased hype, she had learned patience. She waited for the right entry, set her risk, and trusted the system she had built through years of study and mistakes. When she finally clicked buy, she whispered to herself, "This time I'm ready." Hours turned into days, and the chart began to move. Slowly at first, then with force. Green candle after green candle climbed across her screen, and her tiny balance grew larger than she had ever seen it. Not pennies, not nickels, and real money. When she finally closed the trade, her profit was more than her mother made in a month at the diner. She sat frozen in front of the screen. Her hands shook. Tears blurred her vision. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to win. Yet here she was, breaking a cycle that had chained her family for generations. That night, she didn't cry in silence. She laughed. A laugh so deep and unrestrained it startled her mother, who peeked into her room. "What's so funny, baby?" her mother asked, still wearing her greasy work uniform. She looked at her, eyes shining, and said, "Mama, it worked." Her mother didn't understand the details, but she understood the look in her daughter's eyes. It was the look of possibility, the look of freedom. For the first time, hope felt real in their cramped little house. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Instead of rushing to spend the money, she reinvested. She built rules, systems, and journals. Every trade was documented, every mistake dissected, every win analyzed. She was no longer gambling. She was building an empire brick by brick. Her mindset began to shift. Poverty had once taught her to think small, to stretch every dollar for survival. Now the market was teaching her to think big, to see opportunity not as something distant but as something she could create. She started applying the same principles to stocks. At first it felt overwhelming. Companies, earnings, dividends, endless jargon. But the more she studied, the more she realized it was the same language as crypto, just spoken differently. Patterns, cycles, human behavior. When she made her first successful stock investment, she felt the same rush as her first crypto win. And though her portfolio was still modest, she saw a future opening up. Not just survival, but ownership. Ownership of assets, ownership of time, ownership of destiny. Her confidence grew. The same teachers and classmates who once mocked her started to notice something different. She carried herself taller. Her conversations were sharper. While others stressed about temporary problems, she thought in terms of years, decades, legacies. Still, she kept much of it private. She knew wealth whispered before it roared. She wasn't interested in showing off. She was interested in building something lasting. Yet inside, she could feel a transformation taking place. She was no longer just a girl scribbling charts in a notebook. She was becoming a strategist, an investor, a visionary. But success brought new challenges. The more she won, the more fear tried to creep in. What if it was luck? What if it all disappeared tomorrow? Some nights she stared at her screen, second-guessing herself, battling the old voice of doubt that had haunted her since childhood. That's when she began to realize something powerful. Success wasn't just about money. It was about mastering the mind. If she wanted to stay on this path, she had to conquer fear, greed, and impatience. She had to become stronger inside than the storms outside. So she built habits. Meditation before trading. Affirmations before study. Strict routines that reminded her. She was not a victim of the market. She was a student of it. And with discipline, she could become its master. The rooftop became her sanctuary once again. But this time, she stood taller, notebook filled with real strategies, real victories. She no longer looked at the skyscrapers as distant dreams. She began to see them as future addresses. She pointed at one penthouse far off in the glittering skyline and whispered, "I'll stand there one day." And slowly, the city began to respond. She upgraded her mother's life first, quietly. A new refrigerator, a repaired roof, little things that meant everything. Her mother didn't ask where the money came from. She simply hugged her and whispered, "Thank you, baby." Then came bigger moves. Savings grew. Investments multiplied. The cramped house no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a memory she was preparing to leave behind. But even as her balance grew, she remembered the nights of hunger, the whispers of doubt, the sting of discrimination. She carried them like scars, not to weigh her down, but to remind her of the fire that built her. By 18, she was no longer the girl people overlooked. She was the young woman people underestimated, until they saw the results. One evening, she returned to the bank where the teller once dismissed her. This time she wasn't there to ask questions. She was there to open a portfolio account, her balance larger than most adults in that room. The teller's eyes widened, his tone suddenly respectful, but she only smiled, not out of revenge, but out of quiet triumph. You didn't believe in me, but I believed in me, and that was enough. Her journey was far from over. The penthouse was still in the distance, the billions still a dream. But the breakthrough had come. The transformation had begun, and as she walked home that night, she whispered the same words she had written in her notebook years before. One day I won't just dream about the skyline. One day I'll rise above it. This time she no longer wondered if, she knew when. Wealth didn't arrive all at once. It came in layers, slow and deliberate, like bricks stacked carefully to build a fortress. By the time she was 19, her savings had multiplied into something unrecognizable. The cramped house she once hated had become a symbol of how far she had climbed, but she knew it was time to leave it behind. The day she signed the lease for a sleek apartment downtown, she cried. Not because of the marble counters or the glass balcony overlooking the city, but because of the look on her mother's face. For years, her mother had lived bent under the weight of struggle. But now, as she walked through the new apartment, her eyes wide with disbelief, she looked lighter, as though the chains of poverty were finally beginning to loosen. "Baby, this is ours," her mother whispered, running her fingers along the polished counters. She nodded, tears streaming. "No more cramped walls, Mama. No more broken windows. We made it." But this was only the beginning. Her portfolio grew with discipline. She diversified, not only crypto but stocks, real estate, and new ventures. She studied the markets like a scientist, understanding cycles and opportunities that most ignored. While others chased quick riches, she built lasting wealth. And with every win, she remembered the sting of being overlooked. She remembered the times people told her, "Be realistic." Now, when she walked into rooms filled with men twice her age and 10 times her arrogance, she held her head high. She wasn't there to beg for a seat at the table. She was there to buy the table itself. Still, she remained rooted. Instead of losing herself in luxury, she gave back. She funded scholarships for Black students who dreamed of finance but lacked resources. She donated to community centers where children could discover the same spark she once found in a dusty library. She began mentoring young girls, telling them the very words she once whispered to herself. "You belong in places they say you don't." But even as she rose, she knew the world wasn't blind to her success. Some tried to dismiss her. She got lucky. Others tried to undermine her. It won't last. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She let her results speak louder than any doubt. Her first true taste of luxury came with her penthouse. The same skyline she used to stare at from the rooftop of her childhood building now glittered outside her own floor-to-ceiling windows. She stood barefoot on the marble floor one night, staring at the city lights, overwhelmed by the full circle of it all. The girl who once pressed her face against a cracked window in a cramped home was now the woman who looked down from the clouds. But the penthouse wasn't just for her. It was for her mother, who finally had a room of her own, free of leaky ceilings. It was for her younger cousins, who now had someone to look up to besides rappers and athletes. It was for the memory of every ancestor who had been denied wealth, dignity, and freedom. Her wealth was personal, but it was also political. Every dollar she earned was proof that the narrative of limitation placed on Black girls like her was a lie, and she didn't stop. By 21, she was no longer just investing, she was building. She launched her own investment fund, designed to help minorities gain access to opportunities they had long been excluded from. She bought property in neighborhoods others ignored, turning abandoned blocks into thriving communities. She used her voice to speak at conferences not as a token, but as a titan. With wealth came attention. Reporters wanted interviews, Magazines wanted features. Some people celebrated her, others envied her. But she kept her focus. "I didn't come this far for fame," she told one interviewer. "I came this far for freedom. Freedom for me, freedom for my family, and freedom for those who come after me." But the most powerful moment of her rise wasn't captured on camera. It happened on an ordinary night when she visited her old neighborhood. She walked past the same cracked window, the same narrow streets, the same kids playing barefoot on broken sidewalks. Some of them recognized her. Their eyes widened, filled with awe. One little black girl ran up to her, tugging her sleeve. "Is it true? You really rich now?" She knelt down, looking the girl in the eye. "Yes, baby. But you know what? You can be too. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night she realized the true meaning of her journey. It wasn't just about her penthouse. It was about planting seeds of possibility in the hearts of others. She had become living proof that the system's statistics were not destiny. Her rooftop visits changed too. No longer did she sit in quiet longing. Now she stood tall on her penthouse balcony. The entire city stretched beneath her. She would close her eyes, remembering the nights she whispered promises into the wind. Now she spoke louder. "I told you I'd rise. And I did." But even as wealth transformed her life, she remained disciplined. She knew markets could turn, fortunes could vanish. So she built structures to protect what she had created: diversified portfolios, trusts, businesses. She wasn't just getting rich, she was building generational wealth. Her mother no longer worked at the diner. Instead, she traveled, rested, and finally lived without the constant burden of bills. Every time she looked at her daughter, pride filled her eyes. "You broke the chains, baby, you set us free." And though society had once doubted her, now it had no choice but to recognize her. She had become the story they couldn't ignore. The young black girl who went from a cramped house to the rooftop of her penthouse. Not by luck, not by handouts, but by resilience, knowledge, and unshakable belief. Her rise was not just personal victory. It was justice. And yet, deep in her heart, she knew the journey wasn't finished. Wealth wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new mission: to use what she had built to inspire, to educate, and to ensure that no other young black girl ever felt invisible again. The city stretched endlessly beneath her, a constellation of lights flickering against the night. The glass walls of her penthouse reflected her silhouette, no longer the timid girl clutching a torn notebook, but a woman who had carved her name into history. Barefoot, she stepped onto the rooftop balcony, the cool wind brushing against her face. This was it. The place she had once dreamed of while sitting on a cracked rooftop in a cramped neighborhood. Back then, she had whispered promises into the night sky. Tonight, she stood at the very height of those promises fulfilled, a billionaire. The word still felt surreal, but the proof was all around her. Not in the cars parked below, not in the high-rise glass and gold she owned, but in the freedom she carried in her chest. Freedom from struggle, freedom from invisibility, freedom from the chains poverty had wrapped around generations before her. She leaned on the railing, staring at the same skyline that once mocked her. Now it bowed before her, and yet, as powerful as she had become, she never forgot the beginning. The cramped house, the nights of hunger, the dismissive looks, the sting of being underestimated. Those memories were carved into her spirit, not as wounds, but as reminders. They had shaped her hunger, her discipline, her resolve. Her mother joined her on the balcony, wrapped in a silk robe instead of a diner uniform. She stood beside her daughter, eyes filled with quiet pride. "I told you, Mama," she whispered softly. "One day, I'd stand above the skyline." Her mother nodded, tears glistening. "And you carried all of us with you." The journey had not been hers alone. Every step forward had been a rebellion against the narratives written for girls like her. Every trade, every sacrifice, every long night had been more than just about money. It had been about rewriting destiny. Now people asked her for advice everywhere she went. "How did you do it? How did you go from nothing to billions? What was your secret? Her secret wasn't luck. It wasn't even timing. It was strategy, the same strategy she was now determined to share with anyone willing to listen. On one rooftop, evening with cameras rolling for an interview, she looked straight into the lens and spoke to those who felt trapped like she once did. Crypto changed my life, but not because it was magic. It changed my life because I treated it with discipline. I studied it, I respected it, and I built rules that anyone, no matter where you start, can follow. Then she broke down her simple but powerful crypto strategy. Start small, stay consistent. Don't wait until you have thousands. I started with $10. The key is consistency. Whether it's $5 a week or 50, build the habit. Markets reward discipline, not desperation. Never risk what you can't lose. I learned the hard way that greed is the fastest way to poverty. Only invest money you can afford to lose. Protect your survival before you chase wealth. Study cycles, not hype. Everyone chases the hype, but the truth is in the cycles. Crypto moves in seasons, booms, corrections, winters and springs. If you study the cycles, you'll know when to enter and when to wait. Diversify like your life depends on it. Never put all your money in one coin. Spread across Bitcoin, Ethereum, and projects you've researched deeply. Balance risk with stability. Think like a builder, not a gambler. Hold long-term, trade small-term. My wealth didn't come from chasing every pump. It came from holding strong projects for years while trading only with a small portion. Long-term conviction, short-term discipline. Master your mindset. Fear and greed are your real enemies. The market is just a mirror of human emotions. If you can master your own mind, you'll outlast those who panic. She paused, her voice firm, her eyes piercing through the lens. If a black girl from a cramped house with nothing but a notebook could do this, then you can too. Don't let them tell you wealth isn't for you. Don't let them define what's realistic. Reality is what you create. The clip went viral, not because of the strategy itself, but because of the conviction in her voice. She wasn't speaking theory, she was speaking lived truth. And on that rooftop, as the wind carried her words across the city, she felt the same power she had felt as a teenager whispering into the night. Only now her whispers had become declarations. She turned back toward her penthouse, its golden glow spilling across the rooftop. Her journey was far from over. Billionaire was just a milestone. Her true mission was bigger, to ensure no young black girl ever felt invisible again, to prove that dignity and justice could be built not just with protest but with ownership. She took one last look at the skyline, smiled and whispered, "We're just getting started." And if her journey moved you, if it lit even a spark of belief inside you, then join us. Subscribe to Black Journey, where stories of struggle, dignity and triumph rise into power. Because every journey deserves to be told, and yours might be next.